Recently, you sent me a video called The Feasibility Bias, why you're not happy with where you are. And essentially, that's what we're going to be discussing today on the pod. But Ruben, why don't you go ahead and let everyone know what you just showed me? Because it's really interesting and it's a really cool way that we can ask certain questions and get them answered by essentially an AI bot.
Yeah. So what we just went through was how to turn any YouTube video into text. So how to just transcribe any YouTube video and then turn that text into essentially not necessarily training data in this instance, but into a knowledge base that you can query using artificial intelligence. So we can essentially build knowledge bases or knowledge graphs or databases of knowledge from YouTube videos, from text, from books, from research papers, anything, and then it can be queryable, which means you can just ask questions to it using large language models. It's pretty powerful, pretty amazing. We're going to use it during this ep to discuss that video.
Dude, sounds dope. Okay, so I just want to understand step by step what exactly it is that you did. First, you uploaded the video into some sort of AI software where it was able to transcribe the entire video. That was step number one, right?
Yeah, so we used some technology called LangChain. We essentially used LangChain. We passed the URL of the YouTube video. So in your search bar, when you go up to the top, that's the URL. So we copied that, we pasted it in. We used LangChain YouTube loader to go through and then transcribe the text from the audio from the YouTube video, and then store it in a data structure, right? So then we could use that to then start indexing or building chains or summaries of summaries is probably the easiest way to think about it.
Okay, and then once you finished that step, what did you do next with the transcribed video?
So then what we did is we used another technology called GPT index. And so we passed the transcribed text into GPT index, and we got GPT index to create an index over that text, which is essentially the summary of the summaries of the summaries of the summaries.
And how are we able to utilize that in order to ask the AI questions regarding the video?
So essentially what we've done is we've given the AI a form of memory over the text and the document. So the limiting factor currently is you can't pass huge amounts of information into an AI at once because we have limited token size or limited context size. And so we're limited by that essentially. And so what this allows us to do is to create these giant sort of knowledge graphs that can go very deep, but because it's at the base level, it's all of the text. And then we create a summary, and then a summary of the summary, summary of the summary is the summary. And we build these levels up, and it allows it to very efficiently search through that information to then be able to answer questions. And it's very, very powerful. It's fucking amazing.
Bro, I'm mad excited. It sounds so cool. By the way, the video that we are utilizing, that we transcribed, we'll put a link in the description of that video. And it's from the channel Colin Gallen, I believe. So go ahead and subscribe to his channel, like the video, and welcome back to Idiot Squared. Definitely the most open-minded podcast in the world, where we're doing some groundbreaking shit now. Holy guy.
Yeah,
all right.
Good. So just some context too. So Colin Gallen is a competitive programmer. He's one of the best competitive programmers in the world. An amazing thinker, an amazing brain. He's also somebody who shares quite candidly and honestly about his own experiences with certain things, especially mental health and stuff like that. But he has some really amazing mental models that he's used to take him from being, like a no one in the competitive programming world to one of the best competitive programmers that there are. And so he shares a lot of that on his channel. He also helps to learn how to think about things more usefully and in more valuable ways. And a lot of the stuff he touches on is very similar to what we touch on, but just in a completely different space. So analogous concepts, just in a different space. But yeah, highly recommend his channel. He's a cool dude. But yeah, that his video inspired this, because when I watched his video, I'm obviously interested by these things. And the video is on feasibility bias and his take on it. I found it very useful. A quick summary of his video is the following. The video discusses a bias that many people have of devaluing their own achievements and instead attaching more value to the achievements of others. It is caused by the goal becoming more feasible as it is approached, making it less interesting and valuable. This bias can lead to a lack of satisfaction with current accomplishments and an expectation of satisfaction from future goals. And the article discusses the pros and cons of this bias. It's not an article, it's actually a YouTube video. But essentially, he describes how sometimes you can have a bias that makes you sort of downplay your past achievements or not even recognize them, and always be focusing on the next big achievement. And it kind of takes away some of your happiness. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is people that overplay their past achievements and get really cocky and overconfident and then don't achieve things as well, or it inhibits their ability to achieve things or enjoy things. So it's an interesting sort of balance. But I'll just intro it with a brief description that the bot that we just trained in less than 7 minutes has given us on what feasibility bias is based off the summary from the YouTube video. Okay. So I asked it, what is feasibility bias? And the bot replies, or the bot says, feasibility bias is a cognitive bias that causes people to become complacent and satisfied with their current situation, rather than striving for further growth and progress. It can lead to a lack of motivation and resistance to learning more.
So when you first saw the term feasibility bias, what did you think? What came to mind?
Not a whole lot. And that's why I clicked on the video. Like, I'd heard about it loosely before, like these sorts of things loosely before. And I'm obviously interested in biases. You know, there's the whole stigma about like, you're biased and having biases is bad and this whole big thing. But no, that's not true. Biases aren't, necessarily good or bad. They are what we make of them. And in order to actually be able to say anything about anything in the world or the universe, you have to have a bias. The most important thing is that you're aware of your biases, though. So you can't get rid of biases completely. It's just useful to become aware of them so that they don't inhibit your ability to achieve the things that you would like to achieve in your life.
Bro, when I seen the title of the video, I don't know if it was because I didn't read it properly, but I was like, oh, it's a video about biases. Cool. That's dope. I know what that is, right? Because I learned that during many different science courses that I took. So I thought it was going to be along the lines of information bias, or what's the personal bias called again? Oh, affirmation bias. I think that's what it is.
There's yeah, so many of these biases.
So when the video started, Gallen, is it? Or Colin Gallen, right?
Yeah.
Starts talking about what you were mentioning earlier, how we personally measure our success and how we personally measure can inhibit future success and motivation. And I was like, oh, damn, like this is not what I was expecting. This is really cool. I never really put too much thought into this. And during the video, I felt kind of guilty, actually. I felt like I was a bit of a dick, because there's been many times in my life where I got cocky with my accomplishments, and I felt as if I was entitled to certain shit based on some of the accomplishments that I made. And I have to be honest, dude, I think I've been more towards that cocky end of the spectrum, and not so much in the not being motivated or not actually looking at my achievements, because I actually do hold my achievements close to me. And I was thinking, dude, is this not the way? Do I need to reflect on this more? Do I need to, try and change myself a little bit so I can become more successful? Have you found the same in your life, or do you think you're more towards the spectrum where you have a hard time being motivated because you're never aware of your current accomplishments?
So hilarious, because I've for most of my life I've oscillated between both ends of the spectrum, right? Both extremes. So woefully overestimating my own ability in certain things, and then that leading me to get cocky, and then like getting complacent, okay, and then suffering from that. And then at other times, I, dramatically over downplay, or like, excessively downplay my past achievements, and then get lost in this feeling of like I'm incapable of doing it. Okay, so like I've had both ends of that spectrum, and the reason I thought this would be a good topic to discuss is because I think it's quite a common thing, is to go between the two. Like you go from one extreme to another extreme, and honestly, that's most of my life experience is that. It's only just in the last few years, maybe 10 years or so, that I've started to also like not go from extreme to extreme, but I've learned to find a balance point between the two. So I only oscillate ever so slightly between the two now, right? So there's less difference between them. And that to me has been the big game changer. So instead of having the two ends of this, like, they're the boundaries, the upper and lower limit, so to speak. And instead of oscillating between one or the other, try and find a balance point more in the middle.
So after I graduated from university, I was thinking, oh, I got a degree now. You know what I mean? I can do whatever the fuck I want. And what I didn't do is find a job, or I was thinking maybe I'll do more education. I wasn't really sure. I ended up taking a year off, and I lived with a couple of my friends. Actually, you've been to the house where I lived at. Remember the casa in Cambridge?
I remember the casa guy.
Yeah,
the
so
gettable.
Actually, you came down that summer when I had that year off. All I did was party, drink, do drugs. I was living a crazy lifestyle. And I was thinking to myself, oh, it's no big deal. I got a university degree. At any moment, I can just find a job or continue education and I'll be good, right? But that was not the case, dude, because that ain't shit. You need to grind and grind because the world is really, really competitive. So that was like a big moment in my life where I learned, like, dude, like this just isn't enough. So I've been creeping more towards a healthy balance, like yourself. I hope I'm there. Something I need to really think about and reflect on. But yeah, that's a huge mistake to just sit back once you succeed in something and think that the world is just going to come to you, that things are just going to fall in your lap, because they won't. Like, there's no way they will.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yes, there is times where that does happen, but the probability of that happening is very low. And there are some people that just does happen to, and but that's sort of the luck of the draw, so to speak. But then we can talk about luck and how you can influence luck and all these other things. There's the whole topic in that. But yeah, look, honestly, my observation and my interaction with many people is you can sort of put people in a bucket. And it's important to remember that people aren't buckets, but you can put them in them, so to speak, to sort of think about things in a little bit clearer terms. And so you can either put someone in a bucket that they overestimate their past achievements, right, or they dramatically underestimate their past achievements. And I find like that's you can sort of tell a fair bit about somebody. And so because of that, because of how common it is, it's a very powerful thing to become aware of. And so in Australia, where I grew up, we have this thing called the tall poppy syndrome, right? So tall poppy syndrome is like when you start to get good at something, or you start to develop a skill, or you start to stand out a little bit, like you're the poppy that grows taller than the other poppies. You start to stand out, and then they'll chop you down. Okay. And so what that has done, like there's this sort of subconscious culture or even conscious culture of like, don't stand out. Don't, don't show people up, or don't achieve to your full capacity, because you'll become noticeable, or people will start to notice you and then they'll chop you down, or you become a target, and all of these other things. Right. So I'm not sure if in Canada you have a similar thing, but it was a big part of our culture. It is still a big part of the culture in Australia.
I believe so. I believe you would find that in most cultures. People have a tendency to try and take people down who are successful, who have the tall poppy or who are the tall poppy and want to cut them down. It's really interesting. Sometimes you find out who your friends and family. I'm not talking from experience, by the way. I'm just regurgitating things that I've heard successful people say. And what I've heard them say was, as soon as they start making a lot of money, certain friends or family members will start asking them for money. Other people will try and sue them for any reason, try and use their name, essentially just try and just take them down so they can themselves can become successful. And I'm gathering that it's usually from jealousy and a fear of working really hard, because people naturally, I think, look for the easy route, and sometimes taking someone down and making a buck from that might seem like the easy route.
Yeah. That's absolutely the thing. It's always easier to blame than it is to take ownership. So it's really confronting when you see somebody that's successful that you might think you're better than. So then, the logical justification for you is, well, they obviously must have cheated to get there because I'm just as good as them, but I'm not that successful. But, that's the kind of argument you can start to use. But to your point about the not so, it's present in all societies. I agree with you, but it's interesting because I started to get exposed to the culture of the United States of, like the USA and some of the culture over there. And from my interaction with obviously a limited number of people from the United States and who have grown up over there with the environment and things like that, it didn't seem to be as prevalent. They seem to be like quite a bit more supportive of each other. And so I've been like later in my life, or recently in my life, I've been in contact and around and engaged with people like this. And I must say that it's very different to the environment in Australia. These people are very quite supportive, and they kind of like encourage you to boast, like to talk yourself up and to give credit to yourself. And there's a really, really good movie called Coach Carter. Do you remember that movie? Yeah. And there's a quote in Coach Carter, and I can't remember exactly who the original quote's from, but it says, "It isn't." Okay. It isn't. Oh my God, I'm going to butcher it. I'm going to find the quote and we're going to read it out. I don't want to wreck it.
Yeah, Coach Carter. Who says it? Do you remember which character said it?
Oh man, it's been so long. It's been so long.
I wonder if you just put in. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Along the lines of the following. Ready?
Yeah.
It isn't that our greatest fear isn't that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And then it goes on from there. Oh my God, I used to have this memorized.
I'm trying to find it. I found a webpage that shows 51 quotes from Coach Carter, which is
I'm gonna get
a shit ton to try and go through.
Yeah, it's not. It's from someone else, but they say it in Coach Carter.
Okay. So I've experienced. So I've been living in South America.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how people react to that sort of culture. Like you mentioned, in the US, you notice it more. People tend to support people more. I find here, people really do try and go out of their way to take successful people down. And nobody wants to help anybody. Nobody wants to do business together. Nobody wants to do partnerships together. Nobody wants to like help anybody out. Everyone is trying to make it big on their own because nobody has trust in anybody. And it's such a difficult path to try and become successful, because to become really successful, you do need partnerships. You do need help. You do need teammates and a team around you. But I think the culture here, I'm just going to say, so I'm living in Colombia. Since Pablo Escobar, and by the way, Colombians are sick and tired of having this Pablo Escobar cocaine reputation, and I get it, and I've spoken to a lot of Colombians about it. Reputations take a very long time to to change. For example, if we talk about Germany, right? I would say Germany sort of got away from that. I think by now, right? Like people still talk about it and joke around about it, but Germany isn't known for that now. They're known as an economic power in Europe more than anything, and they're known for having the best cars. What's that?
But not so much at the moment. They're having a bit of a tough time with their energy crisis.
Right.
I know exactly what you mean. They've been able to distance themselves from that stigma.
Yeah. So not enough time has passed for Colombia to get away from that stigma. However, what happened during the years of Pablo Escobar is that it just completely destroyed the culture here to the point where very few people trust anybody anymore because there was so much killing and so much stealing and just everything. It just completely destroyed the culture and the society here, and you're still seeing the effects from those days. So because of that, it's very difficult to become successful here if you don't have a base level of income or if you're not born into a family that has some kind of money because nobody here is going to help you. Nobody trusts anybody.
Yeah, that's very tough.
Yeah, it is really tough for Colombians.
The pendulum has swung in two ways. So that Pablo Escobar time was very tough, and it eroded the fabric. Does that make sense? Like the social fabric.
Yeah.
Fabric. And so now they're dealing with the repercussions of all of those actions. And it will take time for people to then start to trust each other and do that kind of thing again. But you're exactly right. It's very hard to be successful as just one person. It typically requires a team, and a decent team. And in order to have a team, there has to be trust. There has to be the ability to collaborate with each other, work together. And a lot of that, you can't do that if you're jealous, right? If you're trying to chop the other people down. It really takes off when you help to build each other up, but not falsely build each other up. Build each other up off your actual real achievements. That kind of, resonate. So with that,
absolutely.
When we talk about this feasibility bias in this sense, some people are very harsh on themselves, even though they could be a little bit, kinder to themselves because their achievements were good things. Other cases, people they drastically overestimate their own ability. Right? They have like a pseudo confidence, like a false, like they're overconfident in their abilities, even though their abilities aren't very good. Yeah. And so, Dunning-Kruger comes into talk as well. Like the less you know, the more you think you know. And then the more you start to learn, the more you realize you don't know. And I think this plays into that feasibility bias as well. So that whole point is that if we're aware of this within ourselves, with this feasibility bias, we can more accurately sort of we can be truer to ourselves and our past achievements and our future goals. It helps us to align better. We can calibrate our senses better, which then leads us to be able to collaborate with other people better.
Absolutely. How do you think we can identify? Maybe we can ask the AI model this question: how can someone identify where on the spectrum they fall in this being too cocky, holding your achievements too high to yourself, versus not showing appreciation or not having gratitude for your past achievements?
Okay, I'll formulate the question. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
We'll go back to that in a second.
Did you have another question you wanted to ask it?
No. I found the quote. What do I want to ask? What? So, the bias.
Because I feel like self-awareness is such a limiting factor.
Yes.
In these types of.
Self-awareness is a superpower, and if you don't have it, it's a limiting factor for sure.
Yeah.
But again, too much can be really tough.
Too much self-awareness?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
When do you think you can have too much self-awareness?
well, from my own experience, too much self-awareness is like, you're fully aware of yourself and you're like, oh, I am typically, I typically overestimate this and I typically underestimate, well, there's a better example. Too much self-awareness can lead to overthinking of too many things. Like you can get stuck trying to think through everything because you become aware of your bias to this. And you go, well, am I just thinking that because I'm biased? Like I know I'm biased to that, but and like you can get stuck in these loops going over it. And so you can spend too much time thinking about these things instead of just acting.
That's me sometimes, bro. That's hilarious. Yeah.
That's why I said it, because I've been lost, right? It's actually quite tough.
Yeah.
We want to know, how can you tell if you have feasibility bias or not?
Yeah, that's a better way to frame the question. And again, this is going to come down to a level of self-awareness. So if you are not in tune with your emotions, with your habits, with who you are, that's obviously going to be step one. And I guess we can maybe talk about how one can achieve that. And I'm hoping that the AI model might be able to shed some light on that, because I feel like that first step of understanding who you are, practicing, can be a very difficult task.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so it says, I asked it, how can someone tell if they have feasibility bias or not? It said, someone can tell if they have feasibility bias. Someone can tell if they have feasibility bias by looking at their attitude towards their accomplishments. If they are too content with where they are and not motivated to learn more or put in more work, then they have the bias. Additionally, if they are more focused on the next thing than anything else, this could be a sign of the bias, right? But that's not worded very well. Silly AI. But yeah, if you're more focused on the next big thing than anything else, this could be a sign that you're downplaying your previous achievements and you're sort of focusing more on future achievements. Right? Now, that isn't inherently a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you then you're constantly dissatisfied. Right? And that's the point that he brings up in the video. That the only time that that's actually a really bad thing is if you're always dissatisfied and you're always having to go on to the next big thing, but you don't get any achievement from that. Right? So and then on the flip side, if you're too content with all the things that you've previously done, that you're then not motivated to do anything new, that can also be quite a bad thing, because essentially both of those things are like stagnation points. Oh, sorry, the looking back one is a stagnation, and the looking forward is you're continuously looking forward onwards and up always, and you're never satisfied in the moment. You're always sort of chasing a happiness, but never getting it. And then the other one is you're just so focused on being content that you then don't do anything else in the future.
Right. So there's a certain level of satisfaction or happiness that you need to have in order to drive motivation. Because if you're not having any happiness or any satisfaction with your achievements or your past achievements, then you may not have a sufficient motivating driving force in order for you to go ahead and achieve more things or better yourself.
Yeah, or said slightly differently is if you don't gain satisfaction from achieving these things that you're wanting to achieve, why are you achieving them? Right, and it's not always about satisfaction. You could do it just for the pure fact of getting it done or creating something and putting it into the universe. That's perfectly fine. But this is more talking towards people that, like, if you're finding yourself to be depressed or sad regularly or something like that, and you've achieved things in your life, but you don't gain any satisfaction from achieving them, that could be letting you know that you might be undervaluing those things that you've previously done.
Can we use a dietitian as an example? I feel like that's the easiest one for me. So imagine a dietitian who finished university 20 years ago, and since then has not read a paper regarding omega-3 or any sort of supplementation or any sort of just hasn't read any studies since they graduated university. So that person, we would place them on the spectrum of what was it? You said it.
They're too content,
Yeah, they're too content, and therefore they're
motivated to
not
learn or put in the work.
right. Exactly. So I suppose because what the AI models, that's what the AI model has just indicated. So that therefore, if you're a person who is practicing or is working in a field that in which you studied and have not read a paper or read very few papers since you finished university, I think that you can now understand that there's something missing inside of you, some motivating factor, which is not making you curious enough to try and become better at your job. So then you would be placed on the low motivational spectrum of this scale.
Yeah, to a degree. So the other thing we can say there will be cases where you don't necessarily need to. So say that dietitian is getting amazing results for all of their clients. Like, is there a need to then keep reading up? Like, if what they have currently and their system works really well for them and they've got a very high success rate and everybody's very happy with that service, then they may not necessarily need to. I myself personally would like to stay up to date, right? Just to see if there's different ways I could be doing things. But this also ties into this concept that we've been talking about over like quite a few pods, which is like, if you already believe that you're 100% right and you're not willing to be wrong, that's very dangerous. And so part of staying up to date and reading things and et cetera is just keeping that little bit like, oh, there could be better ways to do this, and I could be wrong in some things. And it's that looking like out there, looking for that extra information, that continuing to learn, I think is very healthy. But if you do it too much, right, and you're continuously chasing that thing, trying to look for that answer, that can be a bad thing. If you don't do it at all, it can also be a bad thing. And it's just remembering that both ends of the spectrum are dangerous. Again, with all these things, it's about finding the balance between the two.
You made a great point, and I want to retract what I said because I attempted to isolate a very specific issue, because that same dietitian could be motivated in other aspects of the business. For example, hiring dietitians to start their own business, for example, or opening, any sort of affiliated businesses with being a dietitian, and they're more focused on that end of the spectrum and not so much in sort of becoming more knowledgeable on the current knowledge, because like you said, they found something that works really well for them. So I guess what I should have said is, if you're a person that is not looking into progressing any aspects of your life, that be your health, that be your job, that be your relationships, right? If you are a static person, then we would place you on the extreme spectrum of not being motivated. And I think that is a person very easily identifiable. However, if you are just slightly motivated, it could be in your own perception that you wouldn't put yourself on the lower end of that spectrum if you have a self-perception of being a motivated person. And motivation to you might just be doing very few things throughout the year. But then of someone who is very, very motivated, those few things is considered nothing. So then that person would perceive themselves on the same part of the scale as you, because their motivation, self-perception, or their self-perception of motivation is really high. So this becomes really complicated of how you could you can place yourself on the scale.
It's all relative. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
It's all relative. So somebody might be happy with, like, literally, you could use training as an example. Like, I myself was never really satisfied with making a 0.25 kilogram increment on a lift, or I used to, hate using the 1.25 kilo plates. Like, I only wanted to chuck 20s on, man. Like, it wasn't a PR unless it was like 20s on either side. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Whereas for somebody else, literally, like, they could put, a 0.25 kg plate on their bar, and they'd be that they were so proud of that achievement. I myself was never really proud of those achievements. I think I was harsher on myself, if that makes sense. Whereas some people are, a little bit of progress is a lot for them. Whereas for some people, a lot of progress is a little. And this is where it gets into this, it's all relative kind of thing. And so the trick is identifying how you are. None of them are right or wrong. It's just, it is what it is for you. Okay. And so identifying, are you somebody that, undervalues their achievements or overvalues their achievements? All right. And then deciding, like, does this result in the quality of life that I would like to live? And if it doesn't, then understanding that, I can shift that more towards this other end of the spectrum. All right. And then on the inverse, you can shift it up to the other end as well. Okay. But understanding that it in itself is changeable. You yourself are changeable in that regard. So if you are not getting the outcomes that you want, right, start developing this self-awareness so you can become aware of it and move yourself to more of where you would like to be, instead of just taking where you are for granted, or taking where you are is where you're always going to be.
Okay, so I guess we would have to sort of think about the things that, okay, here's a good strategy. Maybe tell me if you think this might be a good strategy or not. And tell me in the comments, and tell us in the comments as well what strategy you use. Okay, so what the strategy could be is that every so often you could essentially write down the achievements that you have achieved that are valuable to you and reflect on them. If you are a person who who doesn't put a lot of value on your personal achievements, maybe just take like 15 minutes out of one day, maybe once a month or so, and you could just write them down. Like graduate university for me would be one, right? And you can sit down and reflect, like, wow, like I actually did that. That was 5 years of my life where I studied really hard. I made friends during that time that I still keep in contact with. I'm still working in that field, whatever it may be. And every so often, train your brain to sort of find satisfaction in what you have already done. What do you think about that?
I love that idea. I actually teach breathwork class twice a week. And in that breathwork class, after we go through some basic sort of mobility drills or movements, I get everybody to lie down. We start doing some specific kinds of breath work. One of those being a sigh breath, where you do a double inhale and then exhale. And it's one of the quickest ways to change your state, and it's specifically to calm yourself down, or to change the tone from your vagal nerve, or for your vagal nerve, the vagal tone, which is the nerve that's essentially connects the heart to the brain. And so I do that, and then as we're going through these series of breaths, I get people to think to themselves, what is the littlest or the smallest possible thing that they are proud of themselves for, or proud of themselves for achieving, or proud of themselves for doing? Not big things, but little thing. Like, what's the littlest possible thing that you can genuinely be proud of yourself for doing, achieving, or being something that is true today that wasn't true previously for you? Okay, if that kind of makes sense. And it's a sort of like a reframing exercise, but it's also like a resizing exercise to realize that little things are actually big, and sometimes big things can be little. And so in doing this, people start to think, and like oftentimes for me, I start thinking about it, and I think like, oh, this big achievement, some achievement. I go, no, that's too big. What's little? And I get all the way down, and honestly, it's mind blowing how many things are actually there for you to be proud of yourself for, right? And to get that satisfaction, to be genuinely proud of your own self for achieving that thing. And then the more you start to do it, it's like a fractal. The more you go in, the more you find, right? And as you start to zoom into that one thing, you realize that there's a whole space of other things in there as well. And I found that to be a very useful tool in retraining my brain to get enjoyment out of achievements that I've done, or even just the little things in life. It's like a way of resensitizing yourself.
That's fucking beautiful, guy. I
Quite
think
powerful.
Colin Yeah, that does sound powerful. Colin mentioned that these achievements that you, I think he talked about reflecting on past achievements, and he said, I thought it was a good example. Is he said these achievements don't have to be huge, don't have to be large achievements. They could be something simple, right? Like, for example, you're at a checkout at a supermarket and you notice the person behind you has less things than you, so you let them go in front of you, right? That could be something that you did that day that you can reflect on. Oh, you know what I did for that person was like a nice gesture. It was a nice thing I did. So it doesn't have to be something huge. It could be something really little that you can sort of pat yourself um, on the back for as well.
Yeah. And I think that there's many more of those things when you really start to look. The trick is you actually have to slow down and try to look for them. And once you do, you realize that it's quite fractal. Like the more you go in, the more you find. Another interesting thing with this is that feasibility bias is you said something. You said Colin had a really good point. Just say that because that's what triggered me to think about it. So,
Yeah, sure. His point was that these achievements in which you reflect on don't have to be very big. They could be very small things.
okay, so that got me to thinking. Right, it's all relative. So one of the quickest ways to destroy your own confidence in yourself or to minimize an achievement that you've done that's actually impressive but make it feel like it isn't is to compare yourself to someone else. Right? So if you have an achievement, you could genuinely feel proud of it, but as soon as you compare yourself to somebody else where that achievement is nothing for them, you will instantly diminish your own achievement. But the same works on the inverse of that, which is like, say you do something that's, not necessarily much. You could find somebody and be like, yeah, but it's so much better than them, or it's so much better than what they've done. And then you can over exaggerate how important that thing really was, right? So everything is relative. So if a way to avoid the common pitfalls, don't compare yourself or what you're doing or your achievements to others. Okay, compare it to who you are and who you've been. And if it is improvement upon that, then you should gain satisfaction from it.
Sometimes parents do a really bad job of that, of comparing you to your friends or other people your age. Oh well, Ruben, he last month Ruben did this and this, and you haven't done anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's always a really bad thing to try, sort of put on your kids and do to your kids. So, so Rubes, I'm kind of thinking about the other side of the spectrum now, and what we could ask the AI. How do we know when we're being too cocky about our achievements, or maybe structure the
Yeah.
question in a different way? Because I'm curious what it what kind of self-awareness it takes for someone who is naturally really cocky to become aware that they're being way too cocky. I find that
Well,
I find
okay.
that
So,
really interesting.
well, if it's leading to complacency, then that's a good indicator, right? So if you feel like you don't need to do anything because you've already done it all, right, then you're obviously being too cocky. Okay. And then the other one, this I just asked it. I said, how can someone know if they're being too cocky? I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but we'll see. It says someone can know if they're being too cocky by evaluating their accomplishments objectively and honestly. Um, I've got something to say on that. But anyway, they ask themselves if they are truly proud of their accomplishment and if they are taking credit for things that they did not do. Additionally, they could consider if they are expecting too much from themselves and if they are setting unrealistic goals. So that doesn't necessarily answer the question, okay? But I think, yeah, if it's leading you to complacency, all right, if you're you don't think you need to do anything because you've done it all or you've already achieved, then that might be being too cocky. If you're extrapolating or over emphasizing little things and making them into big things, that could be another way. Or if your self-perception is dramatically divergent or disconnected from the reality of your achievements, then I think that would also be an indicator of being too cocky. I've always liked the gym for this because, whenever you talk to someone like, I used to be a lot bigger person, like a lot more muscular. And so people would come up to you and they start talking back, oh, my nephew or my grandson or my cousin or my brother or my, whatever, insert relative or someone they know is so much bigger than you. Like they're just huge. They're like this much taller and like they're like this, like you're big, but they're like really big,
Everybody knows a bodybuilder.
Yeah. And then you meet said person and you like, wait, what? I thought you were huge. And then, it turns out they're not. Or how much do you bench? And so you tell them how much they bench. And then, well, my friend can bench 3 times more than you. And you're just like, oh, your friend is the world record holder in bench press? And they're like, no. It's just, so it's perception. And again, self-perception, self-awareness. Some people, this is a very interesting thing, especially with weight training. If you haven't weight trained, you can actually have quite a divergent understanding of how difficult or how heavy weight is. You know what I mean? Like the more you train, the more you sort of calibrate to what is heavy and what is not heavy relative to a human being, if that kind of makes sense. And if you don't weight train, you could think that benching 600 or 700 kilos is like easy. Because you're just so disconnected from the reality of the weight, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I'm still thinking about how a cocky person could self-identify themselves as being too cocky. And I was imagining certain social situations, because when you talk to someone who is really cocky or just loves talking about themselves, the first thing I start doing is looking for an exit. Like, how can I get myself out of this conversation? Because I don't have time to listen to this person talk about themselves and all the things that they love about themselves in this moment. And your body language just sort of like just starts like turning away from the person, and you're like, yeah, oh, that's great, And I feel like if I noticed someone doing that to me, I would pick up on that in a second and be like, oh damn, I'm they don't want to talk to me, right? But for some reason, I've been in situations where that cocky person doesn't get the signals, doesn't get that I don't want to be talking to them anymore. So because that could be an interesting thing. Like if they were able to identify that, they could then reflect on, why is it that the person didn't want to talk to me, right? So how do we get that person to notice that people are essentially being annoyed with them talking about themselves all the time?
So I got a hot take on that, which is I don't think we do. I don't think we care to. I don't think that we should do anything, right? Like, let that person be that person. In all seriousness, cockiness can be a superpower if used, right? Like, it can really be a superpower. Like, think about people who have like unrealistic expectations or say out crazy shit. And like 2 examples that come to my mind just recently is Conor McGregor and Jake Paul. Okay. Now, Conor McGregor started out, was a relative nobody, started having some success in his fights. And something that I think everyone can agree on about Conor McGregor is he's got a lot of confidence, right? Now, how much of that confidence was genuinely like, real to start with, and then how much of it became real, right? And so you sort of have to fake it till you make it in some things. And I believe that with him, it was his own confidence within himself, his cockiness, that actually paved the way for him to achieve the things that he wanted to achieve, right? And you kind of like, Colin brings this up in the video, like, when he first started out, he didn't have any training data on being a professional fighter because he wasn't a professional fighter yet. So, at that point, he shouldn't have much confidence, but he knew that he needed and wanted to do something. Okay. And so then he had to prove to himself over time. And so he started looking at his achievements and then realizing that, or talking to himself about like, he can become the best. He can do all this amazing stuff. And then that sort of, he sort of faked it and then made it. Right. Now, that doesn't happen for everybody, obviously. He's sort of like, a unique case. But Jake Paul's another one of those people, right? Like, early on, everyone bashes them because, like, you're just cocky, you're disconnect. You're not a real boxer. You haven't even been boxing for very long, or like all insert reason why they're not going to be successful. And 9 times out of 10, those people are probably right, but with them, they're not, right? And so that cockiness was a superpower for both of those people. That kind of makes sense. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to think of as well.
Yeah, you made a great point. That's true. I was again isolating a social circumstance, which doesn't really make sense because I'm attempting to like isolate certain things to situations to try and find answers, and it's sort of a thing that we need to look at from a meta standpoint, right?
Yeah. So it's how you use these things, right? It's neither like none of them are good nor bad. It's how do they relate to you, and are you getting the outcomes you want in your life, right? And so if you're overconfident and too cocky, and you're not getting all the things you want, well, then maybe start rethinking some of that and adjusting your own confidence in yourself, like relative to that, okay? And start going, okay, well, I keep overestimating my ability. That lets me down. Okay, so maybe I should go back and like solidify that a bit more and work on that bit because I'm overestimating my ability in that. Now, if you chronically undervalue your achievements and you don't gain any satisfaction from the things you do, but then maybe reflect on that and then start to look back at your achievements and find a way to be proud of them. Yeah. But if you overvalue your achievements, like you blow them up, like, you have one fight and you're like, I'm the best fighter in the world, going back on that and then reflowing, go, no, I'm just a better fighter than I was last week or the week before. Or, it's that kind of, yeah.
Yeah, no, I got you. I guess the cockiness works as long as you are super or hyper or just really motivated. Like you used Conor McGregor and Jake Paul. I mean, I don't know too much about Conor McGregor's life, but I actually follow, like I watch Logan Paul. I watch Impulsive, so indirectly I've learned about Jake Paul as well through Logan, and I've actually become a fan of Jake Paul, and I've been following his boxing career. Actually, did you see the fight today? By the way, no. So yeah, it was all right. I mean, he's put in three and a half years of work into his boxing career, so it's quite astonishing what he's been able to achieve and the attention he's been able to achieve, right? So he's utilized, I guess one aspect was the cockiness in order to sell the fight, but he's also working his ass off behind the scenes. I'm not there with him training, but it does seem like he's putting in the work to be able to be fighting at the same level as Tommy Fury, because Tommy Fury has been fighting or has been training and has come from a family of fighters, and he's been training since 5 years old, I believe is what he said. And Jake has only been training for 3 years, 3.5 years. He's 26, so therefore he started when he was 22, 23 years old. So the guy is super motivated, right? And he's achieved so much in the boxing realm in a very short amount of time. So huge respect to that. And what else did I want to say? Oh yeah, and he lost, by the way. It was a split decision. He did, yeah. I was hoping he was going to win, but he lost split decision, and I think it was the right call. Jake did knock down Tommy in the 8th round, but I just don't think it was enough. Tommy just seemed more in control, landed more shots, had a higher percentage of landed shots. I'm not a boxing expert, so I'm just talking out of my ass, but from my little knowledge about boxing, that's what I see. And I'm a Jake Paul fan, but Tommy won that fight. Tommy won, so is what it is.
This Jake Paul's an interesting case of where that that high amount of confidence, your past ability and your ability, that kind of thing, that cockiness. When you combine that cockiness with hard work, that's a superpower. It's only when you're cocky, right, and it leads to you not doing the work or not wanting to put in the work, not feeling like you don't need to put in the work, that it's a bad thing.
Yeah, that's the annoying guy.
If that's the case, that's the sort of case we're talking about. Like, is if that is the case for you, well, then you should go back and sort of adjust the the realness of your perception of your own abilities, right? And the beautiful thing about life is, if you are wrong, so to speak, life will keep letting you know. It'll just keep smacking you in the face, letting you know that you're wrong about it, right? And then on the flip side of that, if you're someone who undervalues your accomplishments, right, or you're not proud of yourself for the achievements you've previously done, well, then you should probably take some time to slow down and focus on things that you can be proud of, right, and find a way to be proud of yourself for those things, and that will help you to start building that confidence, right? And then if you can combine that confidence with that hard work, sky's the limit.
I agree. I was thinking what it would be like to sit down and have a beer with Conor McGregor, or if he was just getting like a little bit tipsy, would he be talking about himself the whole time, or what would it be like to sit down with Conor McGregor?
I think context would, like, for me, I just think context would be the most important things. Like, where and when are we doing this? What are the circumstances that he's currently going through? So, like, if he's just won a big fight, then it's it could be about that. It could be about how he's a world beater and all those things. If he's having a tough day, it might be about something like that. I think, all of those things are so contextually dependent. And then also, like, who are you and what are you bringing to the table? So, like, if I sit down with Conor McGregor, I'd be curious about certain things. So I genuinely want to ask him. And I'd probably want to talk to him about him and his life a little bit, because I'm genuinely interested. Like, I think that, he's been successful at a high level in a given field. So I'd be curious about that. And I'd be interested in understanding his story. So, I think it's always contextually dependent.
In terms of shit talking, he's the king. Man, he is good. So funny. He really knows how to sell a fight. I've watched a bunch of his shit. I just haven't followed his career closely to know, but he seems like a really, really go-getter, hard worker as well. So yeah, it would be interesting. I actually don't think that he would be annoying to have a beer with. I think he would be a really fun, interesting guy to sit down and listen to, because he's had quite the life.
Absolutely.
And Irish guys are always fun.
Yeah, the Irish are great value. I have many an Irish friend, and they are we had an Irish flatmate who was a lot of fun as well, sketchy at the same time. Okay, so just quickly, let's bring it back. I found the quote I was talking about. Okay, so it is from Marianne Williamson.
Yeah,
and this is our deepest fear. Okay. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Okay? We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. This is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. We are liberated from our own fear. Our presence automatically liberates others.
Damn.
Power, right?
That's beautiful. That's
so,
beautiful.
I tie that back with the whole tall poppy syndrome that I've experienced in Australia, and these other things where it really isn't about shrinking yourself to make other people feel comfortable around you. It really is about letting your light shine, being true to yourself, and not being afraid to be that way. And if you're being yourself, makes other people, embarrassed to be around you, or makes them, feel inadequate, that's honestly their problem. And that's actually an indication that maybe they're not your people and that you should go and try and find your people. And the best way to find your people is to follow your passions and your interests and the things that you love, all right? Being true to yourself. And then you start to engage and interact with other people who are doing the same thing. And then we build each other up instead of tearing each other down.
Fuck yeah. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Please comment on the video, talk shit, rip us apart, ask questions, whatever. Do whatever. We just want these videos to make it to as many in front of, yeah, we just want this video to make it in front of as many eyes as possible. Because yeah, we like doing this. We love doing this. We want to keep doing it, and we want to make sure that you guys also enjoy what we're doing. So let us know.
Yeah, so I would say that if you find these things interesting and thought provoking, or the way we discuss things interesting and thought provoking, if you could just take the time to share it with others, that would be very helpful, because we think that this way of talking and discussing about things, instead of being one extreme to the other, but talking about the balance point between them, and it's sort of more a nuanced discussions, I think these are needed in the world. I think we need to be having more of that. Things are quite polarized, and I don't think that is the most useful and valuable way to have things. And so, yeah, we're just trying to promote this sort of more nuanced discussion and understanding that, you know, it isn't about one extreme or the other. It's about a balance between them.
All right. Very well said, Rubes.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, you fuckers.
All right, dude. I'll see you next week. Love you, bro. Peace.
See you, guy. Bye.
Later.